They never said the words out loud, but I heard them anyway. In the way my mother's shoulders would tense when I walked into the kitchen. In the heavy sigh that escaped my father's lips whenever I tried to contribute to dinner conversation. In the quick glances my brother would shoot across the table, followed by that knowing smirk he'd perfected by age 12. I was the girl who dropped things, the one who forgot to turn off the stove, who mixed up appointments, who asked questions that made everyone uncomfortable. At family gatherings, I learned to make myself small, to hover at the edges of conversations like a ghost waiting for permission, to exist. Sarah's just different, I once heard my aunt whisper to my mother in the hallway. Sweet, but not quite all there, you know? They thought I was upstairs, but I was sitting on the bottom step, my sketchbook pressed against my chest. Like armor, before we continue, drop a comment. Where are you watching this from, and what time is it there? I'd love to know how far this story is reaching. My mother grabbed the plate from my hands before I could even reach the table. I'll get it, sweetheart, she said. But her voice carried that familiar strain of exasperation. Why don't you just sit down? I sat. I always sat. I watched my brother explain his latest project at work, watched my parents lean in with genuine interest, watched them ask follow-up questions and nod approvingly. When the conversation naturally turned to me, the energy shifted. Polite smiles replaced enthusiasm. That's nice, dear, replaced real engagement. I stopped trying to explain the patterns I saw in everything, the way shadows fell across our living room at different times of day, how the colors in my mother's garden seemed to dance together in perfect harmony. These observations earned me confused stares and gentle redirections back to normal topics. School wasn't much different. I claimed the back corner of every classroom, sketching in margins while classmates raised eager hands. Teachers learned not to call on me unless absolutely necessary. I wasn't disruptive, wasn't failing. I was simply invisible, which seemed to suit everyone just fine. My silence became my refuge. If I didn't speak, I couldn't say the wrong thing. If I didn't try, I couldn't fail spectacularly. If I didn't hope, I couldn't be disappointed when that hope was gently, inevitably crushed. But something strange happened during those quiet years. While everyone else was busy talking, I was learning to see. Really see. I noticed how the light in our kitchen made my mother look tired in the mornings, but radiant during golden hour. I saw how my father's entire posture changed when he came home from work, shoulders dropping, face softening, becoming the dad I remembered from early childhood. I started carrying a small notebook everywhere, filling it with sketches and observations no one bothered to ask about. The way rain looked different against different windows. How people's expressions changed when they thought no one was watching. The small details that made spaces feel warm or cold, welcoming or hostile. My family probably thought I was taking notes for school, but I was actually documenting a world they seemed to miss entirely. A world of subtle beauty and hidden connections that spoke to something deep inside me. At 19, I needed a job. Not because my parents pushed me, they seemed content to let me drift indefinitely, but because I was tired of feeling like a burden. I answered an ad for a receptionist position at a small design studio downtown. Nothing fancy, just a converted warehouse space with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting. The interview was with a woman named Linda, probably in her 40s, with gray-streaked hair and paint-stained fingers. She asked me the usual questions about availability and computer skills, but then she paused, looking at the small notebook I'd accidentally left open on her desk. "Did you draw this?" she asked, pointing to a quick sketch I'd made of the waiting area while I was sitting there. I nodded, suddenly embarrassed. "Sorry, I draw sometimes." "Don't apologize," she said. "This is good. You captured the light coming through those windows perfectly. I got the job, but it was exactly what I expected. Answering phones, filing papers, making coffee, runs." The designers worked in the back, in a space filled with large monitors and inspiration boards, and the kind of creative energy I'd always imagined but never experienced. For the first few weeks, I stuck to my desk in the front. But during lunch breaks, when the office was quiet, I found myself wandering into the design area. The software they used looked complex and intimidating, but there was something magnetic about those glowing screens filled with colors and shapes and endless possibilities. One day, Linda found me there, staring at a half-finished logo for a local restaurant. "What do you think?" she asked, settling into the chair beside me. I almost gave my usual response. "It's nice," but something stopped me. Maybe it was the genuine curiosity in her voice, or maybe I was just tired of hiding. "The font doesn't match the feeling," I said quietly. "The restaurant serves comfort food, right? Home-style cooking? But this font is too sharp, too modern. It makes me think of expensive places where you can't relax." Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then she opened a font menu and scrolled through dozens of options. "Show me what you mean," she said. I found a typeface that felt warmer, more organic. Still professional, but with subtle curves that suggested homemade bread and family recipes, passed down through generations. Linda made the change, and suddenly the entire logo felt different, more authentic, more inviting. "Good eye," she said simply. Those 2 words meant more to me than years of polite dismissals from my family. Linda started leaving small tasks on my desk. Nothing official, just little post-it notes asking if I wanted to try matching colors for a brochure or suggesting layout improvements for a flyer. I'd work on them during my lunch break, treating each challenge like a puzzle that needed solving. I didn't tell my family about these extra responsibilities. They still thought I answered phones all day, and I didn't correct them. It felt safer that way. Better to stay in the box they'd built for me than risk their disappointment if I reached for something more. Months passed. The small tasks became bigger projects. Linda started including me in client meetings, introducing me as part of the team without specifying my role. I learned to translate what clients were really asking for when they said things like, "make it pop," or something that feels premium but not pretentious. I was good at reading between the lines. Maybe all those years of decoding my family's unspoken messages had given me skills I didn't know I possessed. I could sense when a client was uncertain, when they needed reassurance rather than more options, when they were secretly hoping we'd talk them out of their own bad ideas. My confidence grew slowly, like a plant reaching toward a window. I started speaking up in meetings, not dramatically, not demanding attention, but offering quiet observations that somehow cut straight to the heart of what needed to be said. The breakthrough came with the Henderson account. They were a mid-sized tech company looking to rebrand completely. New logo, new website, new marketing materials. It was the kind of comprehensive project that could make or break a small studio like ours. During the initial consultation, Mr. Henderson kept talking about disruption and innovation, but something in his voice didn't match his words. He seemed tired, overwhelmed by the pressure to constantly appear cutting edge in an industry that changed daily. After the meeting, Linda asked what I thought. "He doesn't want to disrupt anything," I said. "He wants to connect. His company builds software for small businesses, people who are already intimidated by technology. He needs to feel trustworthy, not revolutionary." Linda nodded slowly. "So what would that look like?" I spent the weekend sketching, thinking about the small business owners who would be Henderson's clients. People like the restaurant owner whose logo we'd fixed months earlier. People who needed technology to work for them, not against them. The design I came up with was clean but warm, professional but approachable. Instead of the harsh blues and metallic grays that dominated the tech industry, I used a palette of deep forest green and warm charcoal, with touches of gold that suggested value without ostentation. The logo itself was simple, a stylized tree, with roots that looked like circuit pathways, suggesting both growth and connection. Technology that was grounded, organic, trustworthy. Linda stared at my sketches for a long time. Then she asked me to mock up the full brand identity. Business cards, letterhead, website layouts, everything. I worked for 3 days straight, forgetting to eat, forgetting to check my phone, completely absorbed in bringing this vision to life. When I finally emerged from the design software, I had created something that felt complete, coherent, alive. "This is it," Linda said, when I showed her the final presentation. "This is exactly what they need." The client meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I assumed I'd be back at my desk, answering phones while Linda presented my work. That's how it had always been. I created, others claimed credit, everyone stayed comfortable. But Linda had other plans. "You're presenting this," she said Monday afternoon. My stomach dropped. "I can't. I don't do presentations." "You do now," she said firmly. "It's your work, your vision, your moment." That night, I barely slept. I practiced the presentation over and over, trying to memorize not just the words but the gestures, the timing, the confidence I'd need to fake. I imagined all the ways it could go wrong. Forgetting my lines, tripping over the projector cord, watching Mr. Henderson's face fall as he realized the person behind the design was just the receptionist who brought coffee. Tuesday morning arrived gray and drizzling. I chose my most professional outfit, a navy blazer my mother had bought me for job interviews, paired with a simple white blouse and black pants. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention away from the work itself. The Henderson team arrived promptly at 10. Mr. Henderson brought his marketing director and his business partner, all of them looking skeptical and slightly impatient. They clearly expected a quick review of some options before making their decision. Linda made brief introductions, then turned to me. "Sarah will be walking you through our proposal today." I felt the familiar flutter of panic, but something else rose up to meet it, a quiet certainty that I'd never experienced before. This work was mine. These ideas had come from somewhere deep inside me, from a place that had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. I started with the research, explaining what I'd observed about their industry and their target market. I talked about the psychology of color, the importance of building trust through visual consistency, the way small details could communicate big ideas. As I spoke, something shifted in the room. Mr. Henderson leaned forward. His marketing director stopped checking her phone. They were listening, really listening, in a way that felt completely foreign to me. When I revealed the final logo, Mr. Henderson was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. "This is exactly what we needed," he said. "How did you know?" I looked around the room, at Linda beaming with pride, at the Henderson team nodding approvingly, at the logo glowing on the screen like a small miracle I'd somehow conjured from nothing. "I just listened," I said. The contract was signed that afternoon. It was the biggest account the studio had ever landed, and word spread quickly through our small industry. Other clients started asking specifically for the designer who did the Henderson rebrand. My family didn't know about any of this. At dinner that week, my brother was explaining his latest promotion while my parents hung on every word. When the conversation turned to me, I gave my usual vague responses about work being fine. But something had changed inside me. For the first time in my life, I had proof that I wasn't broken, wasn't less than, wasn't the disappointment they'd all assumed me to be. I was just different, and that difference had value. The months that followed blurred together in the best possible way. The Henderson success opened doors I'd never imagined existed. Linda promoted me to senior designer, gave me my own office, started introducing me to clients as the creative genius behind our recent successes. But I still went home to the same family dinners, the same polite dismissals, the same careful, choreography of lowered expectations. They asked about my little job in the way people ask about hobbies they don't understand. I could have told them about the awards our Henderson campaign had won, about the feature article in Design Today magazine, about the clients who specifically requested to work with me. But I didn't. Maybe I was protecting myself from their inevitable confusion. Maybe I was protecting them from having to confront how wrong they'd been. Or maybe I was just enjoying the secret knowledge that I was not the person they thought I was. My brother got engaged that fall. The announcement came during Sunday dinner, delivered with the same confidence he'd carried since childhood. My parents erupted in celebration. Champagne appeared, future plans were discussed. My mother immediately started talking about wedding venues and guest lists. "Sarah will be a bridesmaid, of course," my future sister-in-law said, smiling at me across the table. "Though we'll need to find her something simple, nothing too complicated." I nodded and smiled, playing the role they expected. The reliable, uncomplicated sister, who could be counted on to stand quietly in the background while others shined. But as the wedding planning progressed, I found myself observing everything with new eyes. The way my mother fretted over centerpieces, that all looked exactly the same. The way my brother dismissed any suggestion that didn't match his predetermined vision. The way they all seemed to assume that following convention was the same as making good choices. I started sketching again during family meetings, not obviously just small drawings in the margins of wedding magazines. Alternative arrangements, unexpected color combinations, design solutions that honored tradition while adding something fresh and personal. My future sister-in-law noticed one evening when I was doodling during a discussion about invitations. "What's that?" she asked, pointing at my notebook. "Just ideas," I said, starting to close it. "No, wait. Let me see." I reluctantly showed her the sketch, an invitation design that incorporated the same elements they'd been discussing, but arranged in a way that felt more elegant, more balanced, more intentional. "This is beautiful," she said quietly. "Did you really draw this?" My mother leaned over to look, and I saw her expression shift from polite interest to genuine surprise. "Sarah, I didn't know you could do things like this." "It's nothing," I said, automatically. "Just doodling." But my brother's fiancée was already showing the sketch to him, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. For the first time in my life, I had something he wanted. They ended up asking me to design their wedding invitations, not officially. They couldn't quite bring themselves to trust me with something that important. But they wanted to use my ideas for the professional designer they'd hired. I said yes, but I made a condition. I wanted to meet with their designer, directly, to make sure my concept was executed properly. The meeting took place at an elegant stationery boutique downtown. The designer, a woman named Margaret, was probably in her 60s, with the kind of refined confidence that comes from decades of success. She looked at my sketches with the same professional attention Linda had given my work 2 years earlier. But then she asked a question that stopped me cold. "What design studio do you work for?" I hesitated. I work at Fletcher Design, downtown." Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Linda Fletcher's place? I know Linda. Good reputation. And you're Sarah," I said quietly. "Sarah Miller." Margaret went very still. Then she smiled, but it wasn't the polite, dismissive smile I was used to. It was the smile of recognition, of professional respect. "You're the designer who did the Henderson rebrand," she said. "I've been following your work. That campaign was brilliant, completely changed how tech companies think about approachability." I felt my face flush. "You know my work?" "Know it? I've been recommending you to clients. There's a waiting list of companies who want to work with you specifically." My brother and his fiancée exchanged glances. I could see the confusion in their faces, the slow realization that something was happening they didn't understand. "Sarah," my future sister-in-law said carefully, "What exactly do you do at your job?" For the first time in my life, I told my family the truth. Not the simplified version, not the deflection, but the actual truth. I was a senior designer. I had my own office, my own clients, my own reputation in an industry they'd never bothered to learn about. The ride home was silent. My brother kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror like he was seeing me for the first time. My mother sat, in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, not speaking. When we got to my parents' house, my mother finally broke the silence. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. And for the first time I could remember, her voice was uncertain. "Would you have believed me?" I asked back. She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. We both knew the truth. The wedding was beautiful. My invitations were perfect. Margaret had executed them exactly as I'd envisioned, adding small touches that elevated the design even further. Guests commented on them throughout the reception, asking who the designer was. But the real moment came during the speeches. My brother stood up to thank everyone who had helped make the day special, and when he got to me, he paused. "My sister Sarah," he said, looking directly at me across the crowded room. "Who designed the most beautiful invitations any of us have ever seen? Who sees things the rest of us miss? Who's been amazing all along, even when we were too blind to notice?" It wasn't a dramatic apology. It wasn't a tearful reconciliation. It was just acknowledgement, finally, of what had always been true. But the real validation came 3 months later, when Linda called me into her office with news that would change everything. "There's a client who wants to meet with you," she said. "Morrison Industries. They're launching a new division and they want a complete brand identity. But here's the thing. They've been following your work for over a year. They're not just asking for Fletcher Design. They're asking for you specifically." Morrison Industries was the kind of client small studios dream about. Fortune 500 company, unlimited budget, the kind of project that could define a career. My meeting was held in a glass conference room on the 34th floor of a downtown skyscraper. I arrived early, wearing a new suit I'd bought specifically for the occasion. Not navy this time, but a deep burgundy that made me feel confident and professional. The Morrison team was already assembled when I walked in. 5 people around a polished table, all looking at me with the kind of attention I'd spent most of my life avoiding. "Ms. Miller," the lead executive said, standing to shake my hand. "We've been looking forward to this meeting. Your Henderson campaign completely changed our perspective on what corporate branding could be." I took my seat and opened my laptop, but before I could begin my presentation, he held up a hand. "Actually, before we start," he said, "I have to ask. We've been trying to figure out how to reach you for months. Every time we called Fletcher Design, they told us you were busy with other projects. We were starting to think you were avoiding us." I looked around the table at their expectant faces, and something clicked into place. All those months when I'd been taking phone messages, scheduling appointments, managing Linda's calendar, I'd been screening my own calls without realizing it. "I think," I said carefully, "there may have been some confusion about my role at the company." The executive looked puzzled. "Your role? You're the lead designer, aren't you? The one who's been doing all the innovative work?" I felt that familiar flutter of panic, but this time it was accompanied by something else. A quiet certainty that I'd earned my place at this table, that I belonged here regardless of what title was on my business card. "I am now," I said simply. The presentation went perfectly. The Morrison team loved the concepts, approved the timeline, and signed a contract that was 3 times larger than anything Fletcher Design had ever handled. But the moment that mattered most came as we were wrapping up. The lead executive looked around the table at his colleagues, then back at me. "Ms. Miller," he said, "we have to ask, how did you know exactly what we needed? We've been struggling to articulate our vision for months, and you captured it perfectly in your first draft. I thought about all the years I'd spent watching, listening, learning to read the spaces between words. All the times I'd been dismissed, as quiet, as different, as less than. All the skills I'd developed in the shadows while everyone else was focused on the spotlight. I said, echoing words I'd spoken months earlier. Listened. The drive home was different this time. I called my mother from the car, something I'd never done after a work meeting. "Mom," I said when she answered, "I have something to tell you." "What is it, sweetheart?" "I just signed the biggest contract in my company's history. I'm being promoted to creative director, and next month I'm being featured on the cover of Professional Design magazine." There was a long pause, then my mother's voice, softer than I'd ever heard it. "Sarah, I'm so proud of you. I'm so sorry it took me this long to see what everyone else already knew." I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at my house. My house that I'd bought with money I'd earned from work I was genuinely good at, a house my family had never seen, in a life they were just beginning to understand. That weekend, I invited them all over for dinner. My parents, my brother and his wife, even my aunt who'd whispered about me being not quite there, all those years ago. I cooked, carefully, without dropping anything, and served the meal on dishes I'd chosen myself, in a dining room I'd designed according to principles they were only now learning I understood. During dessert, my father cleared his throat. "Sarah," he said, "I owe you an apology. We all do. We saw what we expected to see instead of what was actually there." I looked around the table at these people who'd shaped my understanding of myself for so many years. They looked smaller somehow, less certain than I remembered, but also more human, more willing to be wrong. "You weren't wrong about everything," I said quietly. I was quiet. I was different. I did see things differently than you did. "But that wasn't a flaw," my mother said, tears in her eyes. "That was a gift. And we almost convinced you to hide it. Almost. But not quite." The Morrison campaign launched 6 months later to industry acclaim. The magazine feature came out the following spring with a photo of me in my office, surrounded by awards and client testimonials. The headline read, "The Quiet. Revolutionary. How Sarah Miller is changing corporate design." My mother framed the magazine cover and hung it in her kitchen, where she'd once grabbed plates from my hands because she was afraid I'd drop them. But the moment that meant the most came during a family dinner last month. My nephew, my brother's 5-year-old son, was drawing at the table while the adults talked. He held up his picture, a wild tangle of colors and shapes that made no conventional sense, but somehow felt exactly right. "Look what I made, Aunt Sarah," he said proudly. My mother reached over to look at the drawing, and I saw her pause. For just a moment, I could see her wrestling with her old instincts, the urge to suggest improvements or corrections. But then she smiled and said, "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Tell me about all these colors." And my nephew launched into an elaborate explanation of his artistic choices, his little voice filled with the confidence of someone who'd never been told his vision was wrong. Later, as I was helping clean up, my mother pulled me aside. "I want him to grow up knowing that different doesn't mean wrong," she said quietly. "I want him to know what I wish I'd known when you were his age." I nodded, understanding the weight of what she was saying. The recognition, the regret, the promise to do better. "He will," I said simply, because some gifts are too precious to almost lose twice. Last week I got a call from a young woman who'd just started as a receptionist at a design studio across town. She'd heard about my work, she said, and she had questions about getting started, about believing in yourself, about what to do when nobody takes you seriously. "I spend all day answering phones," she said, "but I see things. I have ideas. I just don't know if they're any good." They are, I told her, remembering Linda's first good eye, and Margaret's recognition, and the Morrison executive's amazement. Trust me, they are. The question isn't whether your ideas are good. The question is whether you're ready to let other people see them. But what if they don't understand? She asked. Then you find people who do, I said, and you keep creating. Anyway, because I've learned that the world needs quiet observers, careful listeners, people who see patterns others miss. The world needs people who are different, who think differently, who create differently. The world needs people like us. I'm still that girl who sees things others miss, who notices the way light moves across a room, who understands the psychology of color, who can translate feelings into visual language. I'm still quiet, still observant, still more comfortable creating than performing. The difference is that now I know these aren't flaws to be fixed. They're superpowers to be celebrated. My family sees me now, really sees me, in a way they never did before. But more importantly, I see myself. I see the value in my perspective, the strength in my sensitivity, the power in my quiet observations. They called me clumsy and dumb, but I was just learning to navigate a world that didn't understand my language. Yet, now I speak fluent success and everyone's finally listening.